more people are on that route, we're starting to notice patterns and connections of different cases that can be related to the route itself. So this is a timeline of kind of what I'm going to be discussing today and what I'm going to be presenting on. So we're going to start off in March of 1996, which was almost 30 years ago. In my mind, when I say 30 years ago, I never think of 96, but we're talking about the disappearance of Alicia Showalter Reynolds. That's what kicks off kind of what, in my theory, is the beginnings of the Route 29 Stalker. Then we have on September 18th of 1996, so only a few months after that, we have Ann Carolyn McDaniel being last seen. And then between 1996 and 1997, there were over 23 reports of different women reporting attempted abductions while they were off of Route 29, all of them describing a similar pattern. So all of them talking about basically a man stopping them and alluding to the fact that they're having some sort of car trouble. Like, I saw your wheel look wobbly, your car was smoking, something was going on that makes them want to pull over. And he presents himself as more of like a helpful figure. Well, I think I know what's going on with your vehicle, but we need to go to point A or point B to either get a part, or remember, this is back in 96, so a lot of times it was a ride to a payphone or a ride to an actual phone. So all of these women were reporting these same things, and most of the women that reported all kind of got the creeps and that bad feeling in the pit of their stomach where they're like, this just does not feel right. I'd rather risk driving my car and it breaking down than just going off with this strange man. But all of these reports were very similar, and we'll see how it relates to the other women as well. We then hop to September of 2010, which is when Samantha Clark is last seen. And the reason that there is a hop is that there are other cases that throughout history were associated, or people thought maybe they could be connected to the Route 29 Stalker, but some of them have since been solved, including one that was actually solved just this past June. I'll talk about that case as well. We then hop to 2 years after Samantha Clark is last seen, and that's when Sage Smith is last seen. I'll be discussing their case. And finally, in what I consider to be the last stop in the similar pattern, is Bonnie Santiago being last seen on July 12th of 2014. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Alicia Showalter Reynolds, and this is, like I said, what I consider to be one of the first cases connected to the Route 29 Stalker. So Alicia Showalter, in March of 1996, she's a graduate student at Johns Hopkins. She's from Baltimore. She's meeting her mom in Charlottesville. They're going to go shopping for a bridesmaid's dress. Her older brother is getting married. It's supposed to be just a really fun, simple day of shopping. And so Alicia was known for being very type A, very punctual. And when her mom is at the mall, Alicia doesn't show up, and it just sets off red flags for her. She's immediately like, this is wrong, something is not right. So she calls Alicia's significant other. Remember, this is 1996, so it is house phones, pagers, and telephones. So she can't just text Alicia and say, hey, why are you running away? So she calls her significant other and basically tells him, hey, Alicia has not shown up, this is not like her. And she basically sits at the mall for about 2 or 3 hours just seeing if she will show up, or seeing if she'll get a call. She knows her daughter will know that she's there, so maybe her daughter will call the mall and try to let her know, hey, something happened. So Alicia disappears, and then a few days after her disappearance, her vehicle is found, and Alicia is also unfortunately found deceased. And after she's found, there are reports that come out that basically are discussing the circumstances of her disappearance. So the day that she disappeared, she had this very distinct car. It was a Mercury Tracker, I believe, and she was seen on the side of Route 29. It's her standing in front of her car. The hood of the car is up, and a man is standing next to her, who's described as being a male, that's a white male, about 30 to 35 years old. He's described as having this kind of swooped haircut, but it kind of matches what I was talking about some of the other women were reporting. This scene where her hood is lifted up, indicating she's having some sort of car trouble. When her car is found, it actually has a white napkin in the window, which if you see cars on the side of the road, they usually do that to say, hey, my car's broken down, but I'm returning. So this is all matching some of the similar signs that we had seen that the other women had reported. So This is from the Virginia State Police website. This is what was listed when she had first disappeared before they found her body. She was 26 years old at the time of her disappearance. But one of the things that came from Alicia's case is that there were so many eyewitnesses because so many people travel up and down Route 29. So this case has popped up a lot recently because of the sketch itself. So this is the sketch that's associated with a lot of the women were reporting and kind of what people were saying in general. This is what that man looked like from 96 to 97, as well as what they reported the man that was around Alicia Showalter Reynolds looked like. And the reason that these sketches have popped up more recently is because if you follow true crime, you know that recently Rex Huberman was indicated as the prime suspect in the Gilgo Beach murders. So when these sketches came out, people couldn't help but notice how much they looked like Rex Huberman. Now I know that you're thinking, okay, he's accused of being a serial killer, but that's all the way in New York. What's his connection to here? Well, he did have a connection to here. In fact, he still does. Rex Huberman's mother lives in Palmyra, Virginia, which is about 50 miles from Culpeper, which is where Alicia Showalter Reynolds' car was found. And around the time that this would have happened, Rex Huberman would have been in his early to mid-30s. And also, if he was living in New York, the connection from New York down to Palmyra, where his mother lives, he would have to pass through Culpeper. So he could have very easily been traveling through that area. So when you see the sketch, the bang, the distinct haircut, the pattern, we don't know, but it makes you think. It's not out of the realm of possibility. I also think that this is the sketch popping up has kind of breathed new life into the case and giving a little bit more attention to Alicia's case. There have been multiple people who've been suspected of being the culprit in Alicia's case. One of which was Richard Devonitz. He was someone else that was a serial killer around the same time. When they had went through his belongings, they had found some drawings and sketches that seemed to line up with the area where Alicia's body was actually found, but they were never able to make a definitive connection to the case. There was another man that was also accused of being involved. His name was Daryl Rice, and he was actually a suspect in another case that was long thought of being a part of the Route 29 Stalker. So that was the murder of Julie Williams and Lolly Winans. They were two women who were murdered in the Shenandoah National Park. And for the longest time, people thought it fit the pattern of the Route 29 Stalker. But actually, in June of last year, they were able to use DNA evidence to prove that it was someone else that was actually their killer. So another name that came about during the course of the sketches being released was a man by the name of Larry Breeden. Some of the women that were calling in were saying that that's who the man was that was stopping people. So police really looked into this name. They had even posted ads basically saying anyone with that name or anyone who was reported to have driven a darker colored pickup truck like a dark blue, they were seeing if they matched that sketch. And police were really never able to connect it to anything, so it never really took off anywhere. So that case is still unsolved to this day, and it's really what I think starts the pattern off to the Route 29 Stalker. The next case that we're going to talk about is Ann Carolyn McDaniel, and this is only a few months after Alicia disappears and is found murdered. So Ann Carolyn McDaniel, she's 20 years old at the time that she disappears, and she actually lives in a group home in the town of Orange, Virginia. So Orange, Virginia is in that same area as Charlottesville and Albemarle County. She's in a group home that's for mentally challenged adults that really are able to be a little bit more independent, but they live in a community together. So on the night of her disappearance, she's last seen on September 18th of 1996, and she basically tells her roommates and her friends in the group home she's heading out to meet a male for a date. She's walking and going to meet him somewhere and go on a date with him. And that's the last that she's seen. And unfortunately, 4 days after she is last seen, her body is found burned, and she's found only about 10 miles away from where Alicia Showalter Reynolds' body was found. And so at the time that this case happened, I'd read a news article that was from like the Virginia Tech student paper, and they were reporting that this was the third murder that had happened in the area at that time. And they had included Alicia Showalter Reynolds' murder, but they had also included the murder of a woman that was 74 who was found murdered in her front yard. She was an organist for her local church. And that case was connected to this case at the same time, but not a lot of people were connecting it to Route 29 specifically, more so because it was in the neighborhood and not actually off the route itself. So if there was a pattern that was starting to be seen by people even at that time, they weren't necessarily connecting it to being this Route 29 spree, but they were more so connecting that 3 women had been murdered in the course of 4 months. So we're gonna hop on to the next part of our timeline. So this is a big jump in time. So we went from 1996, and then the reports from the women who are saying that a man is trying to stop them are from 96 to 97. And as I mentioned, there were other cases between this time period that were originally connected to Route 29, but have since been solved and other people have been implicated. So we hop to 2010, which is our next unsolved case. And this is the disappearance of Samantha Clark. So Samantha Clark may look familiar because she is connected to another infamous murder from Virginia. So Clark is also from Orange, Virginia. That's the same area that Ann Carolyn McDaniel was from. And Clark was last seen in Orange shortly after midnight on September 13th of 2010. She had told her brother that she was going to be heading out for a little bit and she would be back later. And like any good little brother, he immediately called his mom and was like, Samantha just left the house. And it was a good thing that he did that. So this is 2010, and I say this in my podcast a lot. This is going to sound weird on today's standards, but not weird back then. Samantha actually shared a cell phone with her mom. In 2010, I always say in rural areas, we're almost like 2 years behind the rest of the world. So while it may have been normal for everyone else to have a phone, it really wasn't standard that everyone had a phone when they were in high school. So Samantha and her mom shared a phone. They also were really close. They kind of were more like best friends than mother and daughter. And they had went out the previous night, and they had had a little bit of an altercation with a woman. So basically, Samantha and her mom were talking to this woman's boyfriend, and she seemed to have gotten a little bit irate and argued with Samantha. And multiple people had seen this altercation go down. So when Samantha didn't return home the next day, everybody was wondering, could it be connected to that? Did she go out and was, tricked into meeting someone? So as they start digging into what happened with Samantha Clark, they realized that she had, in the day leading up to her disappearance, been communicating with a man by the name of Randy Taylor. And so if you know true crime, then you have probably heard the name Randy Taylor. Randy Taylor is a convicted murderer in the case of Alexis Murphy, who was murdered in Lovingston, Virginia, which is a part of Nelson County, which is right off of Route 29. So this happened with Alexis in 2013, but the case with Samantha is actually in 2010. And Randy is literally texting Samantha the last day that she's alive. And he's texting her, last day that she's seen alive. He's texting her with this connotation of, she should watch her back because remember, she got caught speaking to that woman's boyfriend and basically talking about that situation. But that connection to me was so eerie, and the fact that she disappeared and was never seen from again, and he is connected to Alexis, it just leaves you with a lot of questions as could he have been involved in Samantha's disappearance. So 11 years after Samantha disappeared, police actually made an announcement that they were officially reclassifying her, from missing to actually being murdered. They felt like enough time had passed where they could declare that she had definitely been killed. And I think that as time goes on, we'll have more answers. I think that if there was any type of DNA evidence with Randy Taylor already being in jail, I think we would know by now if he definitively had something to do with her actual murder. But who knows what other role he could have played potentially in a crime that involved Samantha. So after Samantha Clark, we're going to hop to 2 years after that. So Samantha Clark is actually a case that takes place. We talked about her disappearance in 2010. We're hopping now to 2012, and we're going to talk about the disappearance of Sage Smith. So Sage Smith was actually a transgender woman. She would also go by the name Unique, and she was 19 years old when she went missing on November 20th of 2012. And she was last seen waiting in downtown Charlottesville. She was supposed to be meeting someone for which she described as a date. And she was only about 3.5 miles from where Alexis's abandoned car had been found in 2013. So that's after her disappearance. So Sage is supposed to be meeting someone for a date. So as she's waiting for the date, she disappears and no one sees or hears from her again. But as they're investigating into Sage's last day, they realize that she was actually supposed to be meeting someone that day, a man by the name of Eric McFadden. And Eric McFadden, he actually disappears a few days after Sage is reported to be missing. And his girlfriend reports him missing, but once he's reported missing, he actually calls into the police department and is like, hey, I'm not missing, I've just moved to New York, like, I was supposed to meet Sage that day, but I ended up not meeting her at all, so I don't know what happened to her, but I moved to New York. So the police are like, okay, well, why don't you just come back down to Virginia, let's speak in person, and we can get this cleared up. He hangs the phone up on them. So a few days after this happened, he actually has a conversation with his girlfriend. And when he's talking to his girlfriend, he says, I'm gonna come back down to Virginia, take care of a few more things, and then come back up to New York. And the girlfriend is basically like, okay, sure, do that, but she also calls the police and lets them know that. So she's trying to help them be able to apprehend him as soon as he gets to Virginia. But only a few days after that, he gets cold feet and he never shows up. And so he actually is reported missing 6 years after this happened. So they discover an email that he writes to his girlfriend saying that he did in fact meet Sage that day, but he doesn't know what happened to her. He said that Sage had made a lot of enemies, he could have been anyone, but he's basically reported missing. His mom gives a statement to a local news station and basically says that at the time that this all happened, which was back in late 2012 to early 2013, she had assumed that his father had reported him missing. And when she realized that he hadn't been reported missing, she reported him herself. So this was actually 6 years after he was last seen. His family reports him missing. And to this day, neither one of them have ever been seen or heard from again. Both families seem to be under the impression that they're both deceased. Obviously, we don't know the connection on how Eric may have passed or what the connection is with Sage, if he actually did see her or not that day. But that is another case that's connected to Route 29 that is still to this day unsolved. So that's another description, of what Eric looks like and kind of what his last whereabouts were. As you see, in 2012 was when he was last reported as being seen. So when we talked about the timeline earlier, we started in 1996 and we journeyed all the way into 2012. And we talked about a pattern of the things that we're seeing. So one of the common denominators in the earlier cases were trying to get women to pull over by telling them that something was wrong with their vehicle, and then when they're pulled over, trying to get them in a car. So one woman had actually reported an account of where she had actually gotten in the vehicle with this man that was driving the blue truck. And she said as soon as she was in the vehicle, she kind of automatically had that feeling like, I should not have done this. And she ends up trying to hop out of the vehicle, and she ends up breaking her ankle in the course of jumping out. But she's able to escape from him, and she's able to give some details about kind of how this pattern worked out. And this was reported only about 3 weeks before Alicia Showalter Williams disappeared. And what investigators I've seen in articles have reported is that if this is the same person, it was almost like they were doing practice runs and trial runs, getting their feet wet and kind of refining their process over time. And I think that the date setup kind of seems like the next stage in that process, like getting them even more isolated than just flagging them off the side of the road. You have to think, if this is what that person was doing, they run a risk themselves of putting themselves in a vulnerable position if someone pulls over themselves and they could have a weapon on them. Or if they're relying on looking from the back of the vehicle, they could have another person in the car with them as well. They're taking a big gamble. So whereas the date is more intentional, it's more purposeful, and you know they're going to be alone because they're needing you for a date. So in my opinion, the cases have been just kind of getting more and more evolved and refined in the method. So Bonnie Santiago is what I consider to be the last connection that follows that pattern. So she was actually 56 at the time of her disappearance. She was last seen on July 12th of 2014. She was last seen by her boyfriend at his residence at the Carter Mountain Orchards, which is in Arnold County, which is really close to where all of these other cases are taking place off Route 29. And her vehicle was located a few days after she was reported missing, and there was a scene of struggle in the vehicle. There was blood everywhere. There was footprints reported to be on the windshield, which obviously indicates that there was some sort of fight that took place there. And there were also key items like her purse was still there, her keys were in the vehicle, but also a heart medication that she was supposed to be taking every day was found in the vehicle. So it really painted the picture that she didn't leave on her own free will. And so her boyfriend was the person that reported her missing, and if you like true crime, you often know that the significant other is one of the first people that are suspected when these cases happen. But he was actually ruled out very quickly and very early on in the case, and they were able to prove that he didn't have anything to do with Lonnie's disappearance. And this is another case that is still unsolved to this day. So we took the journey from 1996 all the way to 2014. And in my opinion, I think that there are probably even more cases or even more events that may follow this pattern. I think that the attempted abductions, there are so many, 23 women that reported that in the course of a year when all of this was happening. Think about how many women that did not report it or did not pick up on the fact that they may have been a part of an attempted abduction. They may have just thought someone was being nice and trying to help them, and then said, you know, I'll go and get it checked out, and thought that was a great man, and not even thinking that they were almost going to be a victim. So I think that as time goes on, and as we start to dive into more cases that are close to Route 29, we may see other patterns or connections. I mentioned that in the beginning. That's a big reason why I wanted to start my crime podcast, is because there are so many untold stories in Virginia that are just as groundbreaking and shocking and notorious as the ones that we do know about. The Haston murders, the murders of the Lyon sisters, those are two cases that both are connected to my hometown, and it's super small. And there's so many others that I've learned about in the course of doing my stories. I've been lucky enough to be connected with Unsolved Virginia as well over the past few months, and they've given me access to a lot of other cases that I had never even heard of before that are still unsolved to this day. And my goal with the podcast is to tell all of these crime stories, but I think as I'm continuing with the podcast, I really want to focus more on actual cold cases and giving some light to these stories that have been unsolved for a very long time, and it seems like we should be able to have answers by now. I think with the evolution of DNA evidence, with the evolution of technology, we're going to see a lot more of these cold cases solved. So that was my presentation on the Route 29 Stalker. In my opinion, I do think that it was originally one person who carried out these crimes, and I do think that a series or even maybe one copycat is picked up over into the new millennium. That's my personal opinion. I think the MO of the early 1990s cases seem very, very similar, and it makes me think it's one person. So that is my theory on the Route 29 Stalker. I have a QR code right here that will give you a link to my Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok for my podcast. It'll also give you a link to listen on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. Even if you don't have a paid Spotify account, you can still listen to it, as well as if you have an iPhone, you can listen to it for free on Apple. But thank you guys so much for letting me present today, and I'm very excited to be here. I wanted to open up to see if anyone had any questions right now. You can ask me any. Yes.
I'm sorry, did you say that, are you on YouTube then?
I do have a YouTube. I don't have the link posted, but I just launched my TikTok, so I'm going to be posting a link to the first YouTube video. My goal for my next season is to do a little bit more like in-depth dive into the episodes with the video after the fact. So I'll have my YouTube link on there as well.
Okay, thank you. So I can just do a search for
Yes.
Cold Dominion.
Yep, Cold Dominion, a true crime podcast. It's just like that on YouTube. Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Does anyone else have a question? Yes.
Do you have many dealings with the local police?
I have only been connected to, so I'm from Bedford, Virginia, and I ran a trivia night there, and I had gotten close with a few investigators from Lynchburg Police. So one of my episodes connected to one of the cases from Lynchburg. They gave me some insight on that, but I'd love to work more with my local police in Bedford because there are other cases there as well. With Unsolved Virginia, they've opened the door for me to be connected to some of their resources, so that's something I'd like to do more. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
What was the crime that inspired you to start?
Johnny Cashman. That is a case that's from Lynchburg, Virginia, and it was a case where his family was called and told that he had had a medical emergency and passed away. He lived in Lynchburg, his family lived in Rhode Island. So the family, he had had a long battle with substance abuse, but he had seemed to really take and turn around. He was doing really well in his life. And the family has him cremated, but they come down with his girlfriend and clean out his apartment. And when they clean out his apartment, they find blood all over the room. They find bloody handprints all over, and they're like, this does not look like a medical emergency. So then they meet with his neighbor, and they look at the ring cam footage, and you see a video of him going into his apartment. You see a video of his roommate following him in. You hear audio of him screaming, asking his roommate, what are you doing? You see his roommate walk out. You see his roommate walk back up and wipe the handle of the door. You see his roommate leave and shut the door, and then you hear Johnny scream help over and over again. In this case, was told as a death by medical emergency, and that's what his family was told. And so the video and audio from that case is what inspired me to do my True Crime podcast. Since then, one of his family members has reached out to me after the episode, and she's a big supporter of the podcast, and she's expressed how grateful she is that I covered her brother's case because it's still to this day classified as a death by medical emergency. And ABC 13 out of Bedford, Virginia, and Lynchburg, Virginia, and WSET, they did a great story on this, and they have all of the audio and video footage, but that's what inspired me. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you listen to the podcast. Please tell a friend about it. I love being able to do it, and I'm actually going to have a new season of episodes premiering the second week of June. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
I want to say thank you to Jasmine for giving this presentation to us. And this is for you.
Awesome. Thank you so
Appreciation for the
much.
library. And if you like this and you want other things similar to it, we're going to have a form to fill in, and then I'll have it back there in the back. If you could collect it, put it down there. This will let us know for next year what other types of programs we're going to do.